Welcome back. Unseen force moving beneath the surface. You return without announcement, without escort, without permission. There is something different about you, something that does not reach outward for support. You advance by intention, not by necessity. That distinction unsettles observers more than you realize. They are accustomed to reliance, to visible alliances, to shared crutches disguised as connection. But you function from an inner source. You generate momentum without borrowing it. You sustain direction without external fuel. From the very beginning, you carried a presence that could not be mapped. While others searched for anchors, you became your own axis. While they formed clusters to feel secure, you refined your center in solitude. This was never about isolation. It was about self-sufficiency. You do not revolve around shifting opinions. You do not bend toward convenient approval. You do not perform for reassurance. Your movement originates within, and that internal origin makes you unpredictable. They prefer what can be influenced. They prefer what can be persuaded. They prefer what can be redirected with praise or pressure. But you removed those entry points. You sealed the doors quietly. No announcement, no confrontation, just absence of access. And when access disappears, discomfort begins. Because control requires dependency, and you have dissolved dependency at its root. There is a stillness around you now, not emptiness, containment, a controlled current beneath calm expression. People sense it, even if they cannot articulate it. You are not scanning the room for confirmation. You are not adjusting your tone for acceptance. You are not negotiating your essence for inclusion. Understand this clearly. Your autonomy is not detachment from humanity. It is alignment with your own structure. You operate from a core that does not fracture under absence of applause. You move without broadcasting intention. You build without seeking witnesses. That quiet self-trust becomes your signal. And the more you refuse to lean, the more noticeable you become. Not because you demand attention, but because you do not require it. In a culture dependent on validation loops, your self-containment appears disruptive. They search for the crack. They wait for the moment you reach outward in need, but it does not arrive because you are not empty. You are internally supplied. This is the untraceable signal, the current that cannot be intercepted, the path that cannot be redirected. You do not drift toward approval. You generate direction from within, and that is why they grow uneasy. You were not misread by coincidence. Attention followed you long before awareness did. Eyes tracked your patterns. Conclusions were formed in quiet rooms. Assessments were made without your consent. Something about your presence triggered evaluation, not curiosity, evaluation. They sensed distinction before you recognized it yourself, so they categorized it. Your quiet nature was interpreted as fragility. Your composure was described as uncertainty. Your preference for space was branded superiority. Labels became their defense mechanism. Assumptions became their comfort, because what cannot be interpreted easily often unsettles the observer. Every judgment revealed more about them than it ever did about you. Each description was a mirror reflecting their own limitations. They struggled to decode you, so they constructed simplified versions, easier to reduce than to understand, easier to minimize than to admit unfamiliarity. Distance was never rejection. It was refinement. Separation was not exile. It was compression. And compression exposes integrity. When external voices faded, internal clarity strengthened. While others competed for volume, you developed depth. While they exchanged shallow commentary, you built internal discipline. Scrutiny did not weaken you. It conditioned you. Being underestimated created invisibility. Dismissal became insulation. Ridicule became resistance training. Each slight sculpted discernment. Each exclusion intensified perception. You began noticing patterns others overlooked. You began recognizing motives hidden beneath smiles. What they viewed as absence was concentration. What they dismissed as detachment was calibration. You were adjusting quietly, strengthening foundations where no one thought to look. While they formed alliances through chatter, you cultivated endurance through observation. Pressure did not fracture your structure. It revealed it. Tension clarified your design. Misunderstanding sharpened awareness. You learned to listen beneath words. You learned to interpret intention beneath gestures. You discovered that most reactions toward you were rooted in discomfort with what they could not predict. You were being shaped in environments that were never meant to nurture you. That is why the transformation is durable. It was not supported by applause. It was reinforced by resistance, not encouraged by approval, reinforced by doubt. And while they spent energy discussing you, you redirected energy toward development. While they speculated, you strengthened. While they miscalculated, you adapted. You were not distracted by commentary because you were occupied with construction. The marked one is not the loudest in the room. The marked one is the one who alters quietly under pressure, the one who absorbs tension and converts it into clarity, the one who emerges refined without announcing the process. They believed they were defining you. They did not realize they were sharpening you. They require you diminished, not out of hostility, but out of self-preservation. Your capability reflects their inadequacy. Your steadiness highlights their instability. When you function independently, you eliminate points of control. There are no strings to pull, no pressure points to press, no emotional debts to collect, and that absence unsettles them more than confrontation ever could. Influence depends on access. Manipulation depends on attachment. But you have reduced both. You do not respond to guilt narratives. You do not bend under subtle persuasion. You do not chase reconciliation for comfort. That composure disrupts the familiar dynamic because they are accustomed to leverage, and you have removed it quietly. So the experiments begin. A carefully placed remark designed to provoke insecurity. A pause in communication meant to create doubt. A calculated withdrawal intended to trigger pursuit. These are not random behaviors. They are probes, small attempts to locate vulnerability. They wait for irritation. They anticipate overreaction. They search for evidence that you still require their acknowledgement to feel stable. But you remain measured. Your restraint confuses them. Your lack of urgency unsettles them. You do not rush to clarify misunderstandings. You do not scramble to restore tension. You observe. You assess. You choose non-engagement when engagement would serve their agenda. That discipline shifts the dynamic without a single announcement. Understand this clearly. Most control mechanisms rely on emotional reflex. When reflex disappears, authority collapses. When predictable reaction fades, strategy fails. And you have become increasingly unreadable. They cannot corner you with disappointment. They cannot redirect you with praise. They cannot trap you with expectation. Each attempt dissolves against composure. And composure, when consistent, becomes intimidating. This is why subtle pressure increases. Not overt conflict, calculated friction, small tests repeated over time. They are not seeking connection. They are seeking confirmation that you remain accessible, that you can still be influenced, that your center can still be disrupted, but your stillness is deliberate. Your non-response is intentional. Your boundaries are no longer negotiable. You are not cold. You are contained. And containment removes opportunity for interference. What unsettles them most is not aggression. It is your absence of need. You do not seek reassurance. You do not compete for attention. You do not adjust your direction to maintain comfort. You continue forward without requesting permission. And that quiet persistence becomes pressure. Because when someone cannot be redirected, they become unpredictable. When someone cannot be guilted, they become untouchable. When someone refuses to react, they control the pace. You have become the variable they cannot calculate. And that is the hidden threat. There was a turning point, subtle, nearly undetectable. Nothing dramatic on the surface. No announcement, no declaration. Just a decision made internally. You stopped justifying your existence to those who had already formed conclusions. You stopped narrating your intentions for approval. That was the pivot. Before that moment, energy was spent clarifying, correcting, defending. After that moment, energy was redirected toward awareness. You began watching more closely, not with suspicion, but with precision. You listened beyond tone. You studied timing. You examined inconsistencies between words and behavior. Something sharpened within you. You no longer rushed to respond. You allowed pauses to stretch. You allowed statements to hang in the air without immediate reaction. That delay changed everything. because reaction feeds expectation, and you withdrew that supply. Distance formed, but it was internal, not physical. A space between stimulus and response. Within that space, discernment grew. You started recognizing repeated dynamics, familiar tactics disguised as coincidence, emotional patterns, cycling in predictable loops. What once felt confusing became structured. What once felt personal became strategic. Detachment was not indifference. It was filtration. You stopped absorbing every tone shift as personal critique. You stopped internalizing projections as truth. You saw how easily narratives are constructed around convenience. Attempts were made to reposition you, reminders of old versions, invitations back into familiar roles, subtle cues designed to reactivate previous habits. But something in you remained steady. You did not revert. You did not regress. You did not seek comfort in outdated dynamics. Instead, you reinforced limits quietly, not through confrontation, but through consistency. Access became conditional. Availability became selective. Explanations became rarer. You realized that boundaries do not require announcement. They require enforcement, and your restraint carried weight. The absence of immediate response unsettled those who relied on predictable emotion. Your calm demeanor created uncertainty, not because you were hiding something, but because you were no longer easily interpreted. You understood something essential. Quiet does not signal weakness. Stillness does not imply surrender. Sometimes composure is authority in its purest form. Sometimes withholding reaction is the strongest position available. The shift was internal, but its impact was external. Conversations changed. Interactions adjusted. Energy around you recalibrated. Not because you demanded it, because you embodied it. This was not about becoming colder. It was about becoming clearer, less reactive, more deliberate, less accessible, more intentional. And in that clarity, influence shifted. You did not raise your voice. You lowered your exposure. And in doing so, you reclaimed command without ever declaring it. Something recalibrated within you. It was not loud, not dramatic. Yet it altered the atmosphere the moment you entered any space. You sensed it first as a subtle shift in how others responded. Eye contact lingered differently. Tones softened. Pauses stretched longer than usual. Something had changed, and it was not situational. It was structural. Your aura carried density now. Not heaviness, but substance. You were no longer broadcasting availability, no longer transmitting eagerness to be received. There was containment in your demeanor, deliberateness in your posture, economy in your words. Dialogue around you adjusted without instruction. Humor became careful. Commentary became filtered. Casual critique lost its edge. People reconsidered what they would normally say, not because you demanded silence, but because your composure discouraged carelessness. You reduced output. Fewer disclosures, fewer spontaneous reactions, fewer emotional signals for others to interpret. That reduction did not weaken your influence. It intensified it. Because what is limited becomes valuable. What is measured becomes significant. You stopped pursuing environments that did not align. You stopped trying to energize rooms that did not deserve your contribution. Instead, you allowed environments to respond to your standards, without effort, without negotiation. There is a difference between demanding acknowledgement and carrying undeniable presence. You chose the latter. No performance, no exaggeration, just alignment between internal stability and external behavior. People began sensing that you were no longer accessible for emotional extraction. They could not draw from you casually. They could not provoke you for entertainment. They could not rely on you to stabilize their uncertainty. That access had been quietly revoked. And when access becomes restricted, value increases. Your restraint created gravity, not the kind that pulls recklessly, but the kind that commands alignment. Others adjusted subconsciously. Volume lowered. Attitudes softened. Dynamics recalibrated. You did not announce standards. You embodied them. You did not request consideration. You inspired it through consistency. You did not argue for acknowledgement. You became undeniable through composure. This was not transformation through aggression. It was transformation through refinement. Impulses disciplined, expression controlled, and that control shifted the entire exchange. Now, when you speak, it carries intention. When you move, it carries direction. When you remain quiet, it carries meaning. Scarcity replaced accessibility. Precision replaced impulse. Steadiness replaced volatility. The atmosphere responds accordingly. Because when someone no longer seeks to be valued, they begin to be valued automatically. And that is the recalibration they feel. Even if they cannot explain it, your movement carries intention now. Not hurried, not scattered, deliberate, measured. You scan environments with quiet assessment, inflection, pacing, posture, micro-expressions. Nothing dramatic, just continuous evaluation. You register shifts most people overlook. You notice hesitation before agreement, tension behind compliments, alignment hidden beneath casual remarks. You have learned to differentiate between those who deplete and those who simply observe. Some seek reaction, some seek access, others simply study from a distance. You categorize without announcing it. You adjust accordingly. Power no longer requires display. You understand positioning without broadcasting. You sense influence points without exploiting them recklessly. Restraint becomes your discipline. Patience becomes your advantage. Being underestimated no longer irritates you. It serves you. Assumptions create cover. Simplified perceptions grant freedom of maneuver. When others reduce you to something manageable, they stop guarding themselves fully. They relax their defenses, and that relaxation reveals information. Visibility is not always strength. Sometimes subtlety grants more control than dominance ever could. You no longer feel compelled to prove capability. You let impressions remain incomplete. Partial understanding works in your favor. There is no hostility in your approach, no unnecessary confrontation. You do not escalate without purpose. You do not interrupt without calculation. Timing matters. Context matters. Silence often carries more weight than interruption. You decide when dialogue serves strategy and when absence serves it better. Withdrawal is no longer emotional, it is tactical. Engagement is no longer reactive, it is intentional. Misinterpretations about you persist. You allow them. Correcting every false narrative would require excessive exposure, and exposure reduces leverage. So you conserve explanation. You conserve visibility. You conserve disclosure. Others may misjudge your capacity. They may assume limits that do not exist. They may overlook preparation happening beneath the surface. That oversight becomes your edge. There is discipline in waiting, discipline in observing cycles repeat, discipline in allowing patterns to reveal themselves fully before responding. Haste benefits the impatient. Calculation benefits you. Your strength is not loud, it is structured, not explosive, controlled. You do not announce plans. You execute them when conditions align. True dominance rarely advertises itself. It operates beneath awareness. It measures outcomes before movement. It prioritizes precision over spectacle. You are no longer driven by impulse. You are guided by assessment. No wasted effort. No unnecessary friction. The hunter does not reveal intent prematurely. It studies terrain. It studies rhythm. It studies vulnerability. And when movement finally occurs, it is decisive. Not because it was rushed, but because it was prepared. Momentum increases without spectacle. What once required visible effort now advances beneath notice. Development continues, but it no longer needs audience. Refinement happens in private hours. Structure reinforces itself without announcement. The exterior may appear unchanged, yet internally everything is advancing. While attention remains fixed on what can be seen, you invest in what cannot. Depth replaces display. Capability matures quietly. Habits solidify into discipline. Impulses that once demanded expression now dissolve before reaching the surface. There is no need for confirmation anymore. No requirement for acknowledgement to verify improvement. Metrics have shifted inward. Measurement comes from alignment, not applause. Progress is evaluated by consistency, not commentary. This autonomy unsettles observers more than visible ambition ever could, because visible ambition can be tracked. It can be predicted. It can be countered. But silent advancement offers no blueprint, no roadmap, no warning. They attempt to analyze direction, They search for clues in conversation, in behavior, in subtle hints. But you have reduced exposure. You have minimized signals. Trajectory remains internal until execution is necessary. There is a difference between movement that seeks attention and movement that seeks mastery. You chose mastery. No announcements, no declarations, no premature celebration, only continuous refinement. This self-sustaining cycle creates distance, not physical distance, but conceptual distance. Others struggle to place you within familiar categories. Your path does not align with their expectations. Your pace does not follow conventional patterns. Uncertainty emerges on their side. Speculation increases. Assumptions multiply. Because unpredictability disrupts comfort. When someone cannot be mapped, they cannot be managed, and you are no longer operating within accessible frameworks. You do not pause for external checkpoints. You do not wait for permission to elevate. You do not seek reassurance before advancing. Momentum feeds itself. Clarity fuels consistency. Discipline reinforces direction. There is solitude in this process, but not isolation. It is chosen concentration, intentional focus. Expansion no longer feels dramatic. It feels natural, inevitable, like a structure rising steadily beyond visible scaffolding. Others may attempt to forecast your next step. They may attempt to anticipate your ceiling, but their calculations rely on outdated data. They are measuring past versions, not present capability. And that gap widens, because while they attempt to analyze, you continue constructing, without noise, without broadcast, without explanation. Forward, forward, steadily, beyond reach. Nothing about this moment needs a dramatic ending. There is simply clarity now, steady and undeniable. What once felt questioned inside you has settled into certainty. Attempts to limit your direction no longer reach you. Pressure that once tried to shape you no longer fits. You were not built for confinement inside someone else's comfort. The route you chose was never a defect. It was alignment with your own design. Distance from dependency was not a loss of connection. It was a return to self-trust. Stepping away from constant approval was not rebellion. It was recognition of your own authority. Some people relied on your hesitation to feel secure. They felt taller when you doubted yourself. They felt stable when you looked for reassurance. Uncertainty made you accessible, and accessibility made you manageable. But you withdrew that access quietly. You cultivated composure instead of compliance. You strengthened resolve instead of explaining yourself repeatedly. You contained your energy instead of scattering it for acceptance. Through that containment, something solid formed. Not arrogance, not coldness, certainty. Untouchable does not mean distant. It means undisturbed. It means no longer influenced by subtle pressure or shifting opinions. It means grounded beyond manipulation. Interpretations may still circulate, but they no longer alter your direction. You do not seek endorsement to validate your existence. You do not require consensus to justify your decisions. You do not wait for approval before elevating your standards. There is no need for spectacle, no announcement of arrival, just a calm awareness that you stand on your own foundation, steady, self-governed, composed. What you hold now is not something newly created. It was always present beneath layers of expectation and conditioning, beneath roles that never truly fit, beneath narratives that tried to define you. You have not turned into someone else. You have removed what was never yours. Standing independently does not equal isolation. It signifies sovereignty, ownership of direction, command over your own movement without leaning on unstable structures. There is dignity in that stance, a quiet authority that does not fluctuate with praise or criticism, a grounded presence that does not chase validation or retreat under doubt. Others may notice the shift without understanding it. They may sense distance without realizing it is simply self-possession. They may search for the version of you that needed reassurance. That version is gone, not because you hardened, but because you remembered. You were never designed to shrink for comfort. You were always capable of standing self-contained.